Just a few kilometers northeast of Plymouth in Devon is the Dartmoor National Park. It's the most elevated, wide-open and savage natural region in the south of England.
This area's broken-up terrain presents landscapes composed essentially of peat bogs, gorse, and rocky prairies, which help preserve its integrity by preventing any type of intensive agriculture. Here, more than anywhere else in this country, one has a marvelous feeling of space and harmony with nature. Profiled against the horizon of this landscape with its desolate beauty are the astonishing rock formations which gave this area its reputation. They are the strange tors, the tors of Dartmoor.
The largest of them proudly stands at the eastern rim of the park. The name of this enormous structure is Hator Rocks. It's made up of gigantic blocks measuring up to 10 meters across, which all fit neatly together. The tors are made of a type of granite whose white feldspar crystals can be up to 15 centimeters long.
More than 150 tors make up the massif, but each tor is unique. Here, the tor sets a corridor amidst piled-up sheets of rock. The blocks are so precisely adjusted that one wonders when and how this stone idol was erected.
For a long time, it was believed that the giant of the moors called Bowerman's Nose had been raised by men in the days of the Druids. Today, one is forced to admit that this tor, like all the others, is unmistakably of natural origin. The tors are the vestiges of an eroded granitic massif. These rocks are the residue of an ancient mountain range, worn down by erosion, a transformation that stretched out over several million years.
In the Tertiary Age, the climate was relatively warm and humid. At that time, water penetrated cracks in the rock and started a long process of deterioration. Some rocks were not affected by this decomposition, and by the Quaternary Age, they were left standing free, uncovered by landslides and the thaws. The chaotic heaps we see at the feet of the tors are the telltale remnants of this process.
Occasionally, debris is carried away by erosion in such a manner as to leave the remaining stone just barely standing on a sort of pivot. All it then takes is a gentle nudge to cause these rocking stones to slowly oscillate.
Life's but a walking shadow, a poor actor that struts and frets his hour on the stage, and then is heard no more.
What was Shakespeare referring to when he made this observation? Mankind or stone? Both are destined to vanish. No stone, even the hardest, no mountain, no continent can resist the combined assaults of nature. By all available means, it molds, sculpts, transforms the landscape.
Of course, this evolution is usually slow and gradual, spreading out over millions of years. The origin of the fjords of Norway dates back to the Quaternary. The passage of strips of glaciers scraped wide corridors out of the ground. They redug the pre-existing river valleys to enormous depths. The steep walls were further altered by the collapsing of large sections of the rock face along cracks. The sea level rose, filling in the tens of kilometers of space left by the retreating glaciers, and the fjords were born.
In some places, the rock cut is so sharp that the fjord's bank is left suspended in air. Prekestollen is a good example of this. The rock face is so steep that it has become one of the most popular attractions for Scandinavian and foreign sightseers. Here, the rock wall rises vertically for 600 meters to a sharp promontory that dominates the green waters of the Fjord.
The only way up to the top of the Prekestollen is by foot. Those willing to undertake the 3-hour climb will be rewarded by a thrilling experience.
Breathtaking slopes, such as those of the Prekestollen, have always fascinated men. Height, being symbolic of domination, made reaching the summits an irresistible goal. Here, mountain climbers find a climb that is both technical and beautiful. We are on the needle-shaped rock peaks of Saxon Switzerland, which erosion has spared for the moment.
Saxon Switzerland is the easternmost part of Germany at the Czechoslovakian border. On the other side of the border, the Sandstone plateau cut out by the Elbe River and its tributaries extends into Bohemia. Bohemia was held in high esteem during the time of the Romantic poets, and was a favorite subject of 19th century paintings. Today, it still remains popular with tourists, especially the area north of Prague called Bohemian Paradise. A protected natural site, this 300-kilometer-long strip is covered with rock spurs.
These clusters of sandstone columns are much admired by large numbers of Sunday strollers. They enjoy a picnic or relax, hike along the marked trails, or climb with one of the numerous mountain clubs. Of all the areas of Bohemian paradise, Prashiskov Skale is the most remarkable because of the density of spurs.
Until 1870, Old Montpellier was considered an accursed city, haunted by the devil. Sheep and goats venturing there would disappear into the night. Only the howling of the wolves would break the leaden silence.
Despite appearances, Old Montpellier is not a ghost town, but an extraordinary rock formation. Covering 120 hectares, it was created by the streaming of water on the surface of the Black Causse in southern France. The limestone plateaus of the Causse region absorb rainwater like a sponge, which explains the remaining surface aridity. Up to the last century, the Causse was hidden by an unpenetrable forest. It was only in 1883 that the spot was discovered and inventoried.
According to their shapes or outline, most of the rocks have been given evocative names, such as Harlequin's Head, Cyrano's Nose, the Rabbit, the Ship, the Amphora, the Camel, or one of the most original, Mycenae's Gate, a 12-meter-high natural arch. Still in France, although now in its western part, Brittany, the Causse of Plumenac offers forms and colors that are just as astonishing.
The principle of the erosion of granite is particularly visually striking here. Cracks cut up the rock masses into juxtaposed cubes. Water infiltrates the spaces between the blocks and deteriorates the stone. Gradually, the cubes are reduced to boulders surrounded by rock fragments or granitic sand, which the sea easily washes away. This whole process is very slow, as the granitic pocket was formed 300 million years ago. What remains are the chaotically piled up boulders, which, according to the random frailty of the rocks, took on the most surprising shapes.
As for the color of the granite, it's due to the nature of the feldspar it contains. The rosy tint is very special and renders these forms even more enigmatic.
Nature seems to enjoy playing with rocks. The ones at Babele in the Busigi Massif in Romania come from sediment deposits, mainly limestone and sandstone. The three natural reserves set on the slopes of the massif, as well as the ski resort of Sinaia, make this region very appealing to tourists.
But its major attraction is situated on the wind-blown plateau. The violence of the wind adds its erosive effect to other factors: rain alternating cycles of frost and thaw, and the biological crumbling due to mold and lichen. The more fragile limestone is progressively eliminated, leaving the harder sandstone, which takes on varied shapes.
It is here that we find the king of all eroded rocks, the strange Sphinx of Babele. Babele means the old ladies, the name of this group of rocks, whose pillars side by side seem to be lost in endless conversation.
All over the world, natural curiosities of this sort trigger the same type of imagery. Across the continent, on the slopes of Mount Columbus at Theus, we find not old ladies, but maidens wearing bonnets.
Their origin is directly linked to the composition of the ground they are on. It is a soil of moranic origin, whose loose rocks composed of clay and gravel were deposited usually at the thawing of a glacier.
A similar phenomenon occurs at other places in the Alps, such as at Causse in France, in Valais in Switzerland, and in Germany. Here, in Italy, at Segenzano, they are called earthen pyramids.
Rainwater gullies the ground, except where it is protected by a stone block. As the water carries off the soil, a pillar is gradually dug out under the rock. Vegetation plays an important role because it protects the ground from erosion and slows the process.
These phenomenon are also sometimes called fairy chimneys. It seems that only magic could have positioned the stones on top, sometimes 40 meters above ground. The maidens wearing bonnets will keep dancing here in the spot named the ballroom till the day their protective rocks fall off the summit, signaling their eventual decay.
Leaving the French Alps and heading southwest towards the Mediterranean Sea, not far from the city of Marseille, we come upon a very special place called the Calanques.
The landscape suddenly turns into a limestone desert, broken off by the sea. The scenery is characterized by deep, narrow bays with steep banks up to 100 meters high. Along the coast, a whole series of recessed inlets cut out of the rock offers havens of tranquility.
The contrasting colors of the limestone and the sea give the scene a graphic, surrealist quality. Nature created other coastlines of the same type as the calanques on all 5 continents, but the most reputed and extensive ones are those between Marseille and Cassis.
Slanic is a Romanian resort which is very popular for the water sports it offers. It is not, however, by the sea, but on the shores of a saltwater lake with a fabulous setting, the salt mountain of Slanic.
Two underground mines were opened here in the 17th century. One at the lake, the other under the mountain. The ceiling of the first collapsed in the last century, causing a landslide. The mountain became stripped of the soil and vegetation that covered it, revealing the salt which had previously been hidden.
About 20 years ago, the second mine's ceiling collapsed in its turn. Today, one can reach the center of the mountain and visit a cavity whose walls form a natural fresco. But how long will this spectacle endure? Humidity is making the walls fragile, and another cave-in is expected any year now. Deprived of its protective mantle, the salt mountain is condemned.
This cold, inhospitable place was first visited in 1870 by a mining engineer accompanied by 2 friends. The Dobšina Cave is located on the northern slope of Mount Duka in eastern Slovakia. The region has a karstic subsoil and is known as the Slovakian Paradise. News of the first exploration was greeted with enthusiasm by the local inhabitants and spread rapidly throughout the world. The cave was opened to the public as early as 1871, and in 1887, Dobšina became the first cave to be electrically lit.
For 7,000 years, layers upon layers of ice have been accumulating here, and in spots can be as thick as 60 meters. The total quantity of ice has been evaluated at 150,000 cubic meters. To descend into the large gallery at the heart of the mountain and to realize the sheer mass of it is indeed a chilling experience.
A few hundred kilometers to the southwest in Austria, one can explore other ice caves, of which the most awesome is without doubt the Eisreisenwelt. We are on the right bank of the Salzach River, south of Salzburg in the Tennen Massif. The entrance of the cave is at an altitude of 1,650 meters and is accessible by cable car. It's 20 meters wide, almost as high, and looks like the entrance to some gigantic tunnel.
In 1879, an explorer and local hunter climbed up here for the first time to see what lay behind that enormous entrance. After entering and advancing some 200 meters, they were stopped by a wall of ice. "34 years later, Alexander Mork and some friends took the same route, and after several attempts, cut steps into the wall and discovered that it opened out onto a horizontal surface at the top. Animated by the movements of their acetylene lamps, the spectacle was enchanting. Lace, columns, crystalline pillars. They'd never seen anything as beautiful.
The accumulation of ice in underground cavities follows a complex process. Cold air is heavy and tends to sink into the depths of the earth. Ventilation is therefore more intense during the winter, whereas even the slightest movement of air can cease in the summer. That's why it's possible to find permanently frozen caves such as these in areas too temperate to allow ice to form on the surface. Even body heat given off by visitors can affect the caves and cause the fragile crystals to melt. So it's good that access to the caves remains difficult. Those visitors who make the extra effort will be rewarded by a spectacle that remains intact.
Eisriesenwelt means giant world of ice. It's the largest ice cave in the world. When evoking mountain giants, it's impossible to overlook one of the most famous, the Mer de Glace, the Sea of Ice in the French Alps. It's renowned partly because it's so easy to get to. Since 1908, a little rack railway brings visitors from all over the world to the foot of the glacier. Even before it was built, travelers would come up to the Montanvert, the present terminus, on foot or by mule. There were over 200 mules in the Chamonix Valley, with most of the inhabitants keeping a mule or two in order to cash in on this lucrative business. Needless to say, they were none too pleased when the railway project was initially announced.
The main attraction for tourists is the incomparable majesty of the glacier. It owes its name to the fact that its surface has the appearance of an ocean whose waves are asleep. The glacier is streaked with crevices that form as it heads towards the valley, and the curves subject it to enormous distortions. Like all glaciers, it only appears to be motionless, and its slow crawl is accompanied by powerful erosion of the slopes of the Mont Blanc mountain range.
The Alps present a variety of features. In Upper Bavaria, Königssee offers a most romantic mountain vista. South of Berchtesgaden, the steep slopes of Watzmann and Steinernes Meer overlook the lake. It's almost impossible to reach the lake on foot. The best way to see it is to take one of the many boats from Königssee.
All the boats have electric motors so that the passengers can enjoy the silence as they cruise the clear waters of the lake. The lake has a strange particularity, which the guide gladly reveals with the help of his trumpet. As the lake is sunken in among high rock walls, sounds return to their source 7 times.
The boat stops at the Chapel of St. Bartholomew, which offers yet another magnificent vista. Only at the end of the lake does the boat disembark visitors in a protected area traversed by hiking trails. The final cirque meets the Obertsee Valley at the foot of the Teufelzone, from which the 1,300-foot Ruthbach waterfall crashes down.
Admiring the Königssee as it winds its way through the wooded hills invariably makes one think of the fabulous landscapes of Norway. The water is so calm in the fjords that they seem to be enormous mirrors whose calling is but to reflect the beauty of the scenery. At certain times in the fjord of Salzkammen, however, a rare event interrupts the tranquility of the waters. Enormous masses of water flowing out of the fjord meet seawater that is flowing in. The convergence of the currents creates a swirling which gets stronger with the tides. As this phenomenon increases, it becomes more and more dangerous to approach it. The swelling eddies end up generating huge whirlpools up to 20 meters in diameter. Navigation then becomes so perilous that local inhabitants say ocean liners have even been drawn down into the depths of the fjord, never to be seen again.
Luckily, the phenomenon is not always of such magnitude, and the local sailors have learned to navigate amidst the multiple currents. It must be mentioned that this agitation attracts fish. High tide is therefore the rendezvous for all the fishermen. Most prefer to try their luck from dry land, although the most courageous venture out with their skiffs into the middle of the inlet, thus catching the most fish. But it seems that it's the birds of South Stroman that have the best technique. Their biggest difficulty, holding on to their catch.
The 1,320-kilometer-long Rhine River also offers a variety of landscapes. Upstream, it is a typical mountain river with a low flow of water in the winter, which rises with the thawing of the glaciers. Lake Constance then tempers the violence of the floodwaters.
After majestically passing through the town of Schaffhausen, its surface comes alive. It flows faster and, like the mountain torrent of its origin, throws itself into space, to violently crash more than 20 meters below. We are in Switzerland, before the famous falls of the Rhine at Neuhausen. Spread out 150 meters wide, between 4 red limestone boulders, the river surges out like a giant white wave. It's the largest waterfall in Europe, and one of the most beautiful natural splendors. One can reach the promontory in the center of the falls by boat, but the most grandiose view can be had from the medieval castle of Laufen, which dominates the break in the river.
After the falls, the Rhine stretches out into a vast basin, before flowing on, wide and slow, for the continuation of its European adventure. As for the more modest Verdon River, it silently toils away. For thousands of years it has been patiently gnawing at the pre-Alps, the foothills of the Alpes de Provence in southern France. These form a sort of low mountainous belt, like steps towards the high summits. The massives are of limestone mountains which are tall and monumental in the north and less imposing in the south.
On this karstic or calcareous soil, the river's erosion has been particularly striking. Here, the Verdon has fashioned the longest and deepest canyon in France. The irregular depressions of the riverbed are due to tectonic deformations that occurred while the canyon was still being carved out. The drop reaches 700 meters at a spot called Bar de l'Escalès. Along the 21 kilometers of steep, sunken-in banks of the canyon, the Verdon offers some stunning scenery. Then it flows on toward the west till it runs into the Durance River.
On the banks of this river begins the story of the Rochers des Mets, the Mets Rocks. It started 300 million years ago, when the Durance Fault was like a huge crack on the surface of the Earth. During the Tertiary, the fault played a role in the formation of the Alps by constituting a limit between the upper eastern zone and a basin where sediment accumulated. Then the sea returned, depositing sand and pebbles. Other layers of sandstone and clay were added before the great glaciers of the Quaternary transformed the landscape. Much later, when the Durance was etching out its course, it had to respect a large conglomerate of bonded pebbles, where we find the Mets today. The streaming waters concentrated in the narrow gorges, where erosion is the most efficient.
These strange shapes haunt the little town of May. They're called the Penitents of May, for as local legend has it, at the time of the Saracen invasion, a young knight had as his mission to escort 7 beautiful Moorish maidens who were prisoners via the river to the city of Arles. Along the way, they met some monks who became quite stirred up at the sight of the young women. The local saint, a hermit, saw what was going to happen and, to preserve the monks from sin, petrified them, frocks and all, and there they have stood till this very day.
The village elders of Burren, in Ireland, also enjoy telling legends. One must admit that the remarkable scenery in the region is quite apt to inspire all sorts of tales.
In Gaelic, Burren means rocky place, and this land is built on rock indeed.
Situated in the northeast of Clare County, this craggy, arid 250 square kilometer plateau rises into cliffs or slopes gently down to the sea. The origin of this geological phenomenon dates back to the Carboniferous Age, 340 million years ago. The ocean once covered this whole area. Leftover vegetal debris, animal skeletons, and alluvial mud deposits brought by rivers formed layers of sediment up to 700 meters thick.
In 1649, during the English invasion of Ireland led by Cromwell, one of his commanding officers commented on this region.
There's not enough land here to bury a man, not enough trees to hang him, not enough water to drown him.
Which didn't stop them from brutally colonizing the area.
The ground is streaked with more or less apparent grooves, giving it the appearance of being paved with flagstones. The cracks are between 15 and 60 centimeters wide and 2 to 6 centimeters deep. As for the slabs, they vary from a few centimeters to 50 square meters. The proximity of the Gulf Stream makes the climate extremely mild. allowing flowers to blossom in relays all year round. In the cracks and crevices, where the limestone retains heat, the vegetation is protected and flourishes. Gentian, many varieties of orchids, juniper, wild thyme, geraniums, and ferns offer incredible diversity.
The vegetation is much less varied here in Lapland, in northern Scandinavia. It's composed of forests and tundra. We're north of the 70th parallel, well inside the Arctic Circle. During the winter, nights can last several weeks, yet sunsets toward the end of spring are quite unique.
One of the best places to observe this is Utaklev. It is 11 p.m. and the sun appears to be at the end of its course in the sky, and one expects it to plunge behind the horizon. But in this season, the sun never sets. It's the mythical midnight sun.
It's daybreak at Langjökull, the huge glacier in the west of Iceland that feeds the Hvita, the White River. Upon arriving at Gullfoss, the river drops several levels before throwing itself into a ravine. Here, the Gullfoss displays its pallor. When the water is inexorably swept off the edge, it drops for 33 meters before rebounding anew towards the gaping basalt fault.
Gullfoss means golden falls, and the name refers to the colors of the rainbow that form in the mist of sprayed water. It also evokes the beauty and grandeur of the landscape. Words can never suffice to describe the wonders of nature's creations. Only the power unfolded before our eyes can offer us a glimpse.